Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to look at Borderland 4 Proposed Minimum Requirement, which consists of the i7-9700 or the Ryzen 7 2700X, 16GB of RAM, the RTX 2070, the Radeon RX 57 XT, and the Intel Arc A580. To keep in mind, it also required 8 CPU core for the processor and require 8GB of VRAM for the graphics, and SSD storage is required. A lot of requirement. Welcome to Respawn PC, I'm Dunk, let's game on. First, I don't have the i7-9700, so I'm going to go with the i7-10700F, which is the closest I have in my arsenal with 8 core. I don't want to do the same mistake and be bottlenecked by the CPU 6 core 12 thread from Random Gaming in HD and Daniel Owen. I want to actually test the minimum requirement of the GPU, and thanks to their video I know a 6 core 12 thread is not an option, so therefore that's why I have the i7-10700F, which is a 8 core 16 thread. And starting off with the i7-10700F, not the KF as you can see in the MSI Afterburner because mistype I guess, and the RTX 2070. We're playing at 1080p, lowest settings, and DLSS native. We have the GPU in the i90s, not always pegged at 100%, using 6.1 GB of VRAM. The i7 is hovering in the mid 40 to the mid 50s, and we're using 10.7 GB of RAM. Frame time frame graph is quite smooth, but encounter quite often a big stutter or big lag. And all that will give us an average of 39 FPS. But since we are the DLSS native, you can also drop to quality or even balance if you prefer to have a higher FPS than better visual quality. The good thing is, because of the style visual of this game, you can actually drop to balance and barely see any difference visually and gain a lot of FPS. In the case of the RTX 2070, dropping to balance DLSS, we get just close enough to the 60 FPS, often reaching over it when it's not too buzzy in the screen. Now with the same system, just switching the GPU from the RTX 2070 to the Intel Arc A580, because I like to keep Intel with Intel and AMD with AMD. This is an 8GB VRAM card. We're playing again at 1080p, lowest settings, XCSS native. We get the GPU pegged most of the time at 99%, using 7.1 GB of VRAM average. CPU is still in the mid 30s to the mid 40s, a bit lower than with the RTX, but we get an average of 35 FPS. Again, the frame time frame graph is quite smooth, beside the big stutter here and there for some reason. And don't forget, I'm at the native resolution XCSS. You can drop to quality or balance to gain a little bit more. At quality you get around 45 FPS, and at balance not much more, but you get a 49 FPS average. And finally, AMD side. I don't have the Ryzen 7 2700X, I have the non-X variant, so close enough. And I don't have the RX 5700 XT, I only have the non-XT variant, but that will have to do, and the result is quite good enough anyway. Still at 1080p, lowest settings, FSR native, we get an average of 40 FPS. GPU pegged most of the time at 99% of its position, using 5 to 6 GB of VRAM. CPU is in the mid 60s, starting to be a little bit high, even though it's still a 8 core CPU. We are using 13.2 GB of RAM, higher than the Intel and the Nvidia side of things, with the frame graph frame time quite smooth again, with the occasional big stutter here and there. And again, I'm on FSR AA native. That means you can drop to quality or balance to get a little bit more FPS. And again, for this kind of graphic design, you won't see much difference in degradation visual quality. In the end, what the dev recommend for the proposed minimum requirement, if their goal was 1080p lowest settings with upscaling enable and 30 FPS, they're quite on it. The RTX 2070, the A580, and the RX 5700. Probably non-XT variant should have been the one, but close enough. 16GB of RAM for minimum, that's good enough. And as Random Gaming in HD and Daniel Owen tested, less than 8 physical core on the CPU is not an option. You'll be CPU bottleneck. And that's all for today's video. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one, and subscribe.